Okay, an easy way to create a gunshot wound when you don't have a prosthetic transfer available and you need something on the fly is to use liquid latex and cotton buildup. This is a very old technique that's been around for as long as I know and as long as the makeup industry has been around. So what you want is your liquid latex. Now, a good thing to note is that latex will stick to latex. So aside from your sponges being latex-free for allergy reasons, if you were to use a latex sponge with latex makeup, it will stick to itself and you won't be able to actually move around with it. So to start this, you want to take a fairly heavy application, put a bit of it down on the skin like this. Then what we're going to do is we're going to take a cotton ball. Now cotton balls are just rolled up pieces of cotton. So you can just find the edge and unroll the cotton so you have it in a flat piece. And then you can just pull it apart and take a tiny little bit. You have much more than you need, but you want to make sure that there's no straight edge to this. So working in tiny pieces and building up is what we're going to work on. So take a little piece. While the latex is still wet, we're going to push this into it. And think of building a small hole. Now again, this is not the ideal technique for doing this, but it is a technique that is very inexpensive, it's easy to practice, and it's something you can do very quickly if you have these items in your kit and you don't have anything else. Which one of the most important things as a makeup artist is being resourceful with the materials that you have, so you're able to roll with the punches and find something as you have it. After you've done your first layer of latex and cotton, you go back in. You take more latex and you go right on top of that cotton. Now this is definitely where a hairdryer comes in handy because you are able to dry in between these layers and speed up the process. Once you've done that layer, what I like to do is actually take the spatula, because the spatula has this little end to it, and you're not going to press hard, of course, but you're going to start manipulating this cotton and latex and open up the center area. Again, reference photos of a gunshot wound will be very helpful here, so you have an idea of what it would look like. And this is, again, just like any of these techniques, is something that can be achieved with just paint, just highlight and paint. Certainly, it has a greater wow factor and looks more realistic if you're using prosthetics or if you're using a 3D thing like this, but it can be achievable through just paint if you'd like. It's a good exercise to practice doing these and all the different techniques to familiarize yourself with it. When you're doing gunshots as well, it's important to know all the details. So it's important to know what type of gun the person was shot with. For example, if it was a shotgun, the entrance wound is going to be very different than if it were shot with a .22 caliber gun. So knowing what the bullet shape looks like and the different wounds that it gives a more realistic appearance. So as the latex starts to dry, you won't be able to fuss with it anymore. So it is important to work with it while it's still wet here and just lift it up slightly. So you'll see I'm kind of going around in a light circular fashion, but I'm lifting the edge and I'm leaving the edge. So now we're creating dimension in here. Some areas are deeper than others. Again, there's a lot of lift here, so we'll have a lot of dimension here. There's some lift here, but there's not that much there. It's an imperfect circle that we're creating. Okay, so while we're waiting for our latex to dry, I'm going to show you how to create a burn. I'm going to use, again, some prosthetic transfers. This is going to create kind of a second-degree burn. Think again, when you're creating a burn for someone, there are many factors to keep in mind. Is it a first-degree burn? Is it a second-degree burn? Is it a third-degree burn? Also, you want to know how the burn happened. Was it a sunburn? Was it a chemical burn? Was it a burn from steam? Was it a burn from actual fire? All of those things pay importance to what the actual makeup looks like. For example, if someone has third-degree burns from the sun, it will look completely different than someone who has third-degree burns from a chemical burn. So knowing as much detail as possible will help you with your planning. So What I'm doing here is gonna be more of a blistery burn, and he's gonna have a burn over here. This poor guy has everything happening to him. So as always, we're gonna clean the area with a little bit of alcohol. While that dries down, we're gonna peel slowly the top plastic layer. Off of our transfer. Make sure that it's dry before you stick down. Adhere the entire thing to the skin. Hold it down while you get your wet sponge. Hold your water in here. For something larger like this, similar as the face up here, I like to hold it down and make sure all the areas of the paper are saturated before I continuously hold it in one position. It kind of just starts the transfer process. Now another thing with these transfers, because they are made from the adhesive Pros-Aid, you can, if you would like, you can stipple a thin layer of Pros-Aid over top of the transfer once we pull this paper off to make it last a bit longer and help to blend the edge. It's certainly not necessary, but if you're going to be using the makeup to be worn for a long time, it's a good idea to kind of blend it a little bit extra with the Pros-Aid. After we pull this off, it's time to get painting. So again, if you want to blend these edges out a little bit more, some alcohol will help you in this process to thin the edges down. And then when you're painting a burn, you want to think of the different tones. So very obviously with this one, we have some bubble and we have some boil to it. So in the darker circular areas, we're going to go darker. We're going to use some really dark reds. We're going to use some dark blacks to really give a lot of dimension and pop the eyes and make it look like it's much more 3D on top of the skin. Think of too a way that you could do this without having a transfer. You could paint it. You could use cotton and latex and kind of open it up with the cotton and latex and build it up there to give texture. But you could also use the latex by itself. Similar to how we did the scrape, you could lay down a few layers of latex, build it up thicker, and then just open it up yourself. Just kind of create a custom burn. So there are many different ways that you can create a burn makeup, but something like this using the transfer is going to give you the best effect and look the most realistic on the skin. Now for this, I'm going to use a very small brush for detail and our alcohol makeup. And I'm going to start with mixing some black with a really deep red. I'm going to start with my detail on this one, on the inner circles. That way we have the depth. Then we can go over top of it all with a color to match his skin tone. And again, we're not going completely full opaque with anything. It's all hitting different parts at different times. You could even go slightly around the edges as well, certain of them, to make them stand out a bit more. Maybe we go over here a bit. Another thing to keep in mind with a burn too is they may actually need some black charcoal powder around the burn. For example, if they were in a house fire and they have a lot of ash that they have inhaled, they may have a lot of ash that actually charred the skin. So you may need to stipple some black powder on top of the skin to give the illusion of an ash effect. Also, if they have, think of if they're in a house fire and they inhaled a lot of ash, they might have black in their mouth. They might have black around their nose areas, kind of around their eyes. You might need to put a bit all over the place to make the grand illusion of the burn as opposed to just one little spot. Now, of course, we're just showing technique here, so we're not doing a full burn character, but just know for when you're planning a full character, it should be a full character, unless you're just practicing different techniques like we are here to showcase. Once you've added a little bit of depth and dimension to there with the darker colors, then you can go in with more flesh tone and you can actually balance it out to match the skin. I like to use my ripped up sponge for this. Again, I just like everything to be imperfect when I'm painting. And I find sometimes a brush is just way too perfect. This part here, knowing your client's skin tone and their undertones, is going to come in handy a lot when you're choosing the colors that you do. So knowing that he has more of a warm undertone to his skin lets me know that, one, I want to choose something that has more of a warm undertone, but also I'm not going to go with too much pink. Certainly I'm going to add a little bit of a pink because we do know that there is pink in skin tone as well. But the transfer material does have a slight pink tint to it, so it kind of gives us a little bit of that effect without adding too much. Now these alcohol palettes are great because they really give you a sheer wash of color and the illusion of the color being a part of the product versus going right in with full-blown cream makeup. So this is my preference to use these alcohol ones, but you may find that you like the cream better. It's just a personal preference at the end of the day. And also, like I was stating, these are much more durable than the cream makeups. Cream used to be the standard. However, it has moved away from that and moved into the standard being the alcohol ones. Now that I have a somewhat close skin tone to him, I'm going to take a little bit of a blood tone and tap the blood tone right on top. And we're going to do, again, as always, varying levels of blood. So we start with a little bit of a brighter one because we want to give more of the illusion. But again, we're still letting some of the yellow pop through. I'm going to take this out a bit as well and expand to the side. Now granted, you will want to layer this up, so you will want to put a few different pieces in there because of course you wouldn't just get a burn straight flat like this, so you would want to build your pieces around and layer them in the area where the burn is meant to happen. But for technique purposes, we're just doing the one to show you how to do it. And then from there, it's all creativity, and you take your creativity and you take your reference photos and you build it up from there. Giving a little bit of irritation around the outside, of course, always helps to break the tone up a bit. From there, a large part of what you want to do is add a little bit of blood. Now for this one, I'm going to use more of a dark blood because I want it to look like it's been sitting for a bit longer than an actual fresh one. So using a deeper tone blood here. Starting to go in these darker areas. Filling in at first. And then lightly tap around. Because of course the blood's not just going to stay in the one area, it's going to move around. Certain ones will trickle down as well. Maybe the larger ones, you can let a little drop of it kind of float on its own, help it along its way. Think of the overall picture here. Think of it not as just a tiny little burn here, but what's happening when he got the burn? Does he have a shirt on? Did he pull a shirt off? If he pulled a shirt off, the blood would be going in a different direction and you would smudge it in a different direction. But it's rare that it will ever just be perfect tapped on blood because it is an injury. So there's a lot going on when something happens. Just keeping with the inconsistent theme, slightly spreading things around will eventually build up to a really beautiful natural burn look. Now here you'll see I put a giant drop of blood, and we're just going to let that fall where it does. Let it go, follow with gravity. You can kind of help it along a little bit by slowly just pushing down to speed up the process if you're in a pinch and you need to work quickly. But it is best just to let it find its way on its own. It adds to the realism of the look as well. Same thing up here. Go for the ones that are a little bit bigger, a little bit darker. Okay, so we're going to move back to our gunshot now that it's had a chance to dry. So this one isn't going to be too bad of a gunshot, which sounds like a funny thing to say. But another thing you can do, once the latex is dry, you can sort of rip it slightly. Again, this is adhered to the skin, so please be careful when you're doing this. You don't want to actually hurt your actor in the process. You just want to make it look like you hurt your actor. So giving a little bit more manipulation to the product can be helpful if you find that you want a little bit more. Now, latex is slightly different than the rest of them because using too heavy of that alcohol-activated makeup isn't going to give the amount of coverage that you're looking for. Sometimes it actually doesn't react well on the latex. So we're going to use some of our cream-based makeup for this one. Now, I'm going to start with a little bit of a black and a little bit of a brown to give our dimension. I like to start with the dimension first, which you may have already noticed. And again, tapping motion, we're using inconsistency here. And just slightly fill in. Adding depth in the points where it's the highest is going to give a little bit more. A little bit of reds as well. Pull a little bit of red tone in here. Now you will see there is a big difference in quality of the latex versus the prosthetic pieces and the transfers and the other things that we've done. This is a big thing to note when you are doing makeup, is that you can get very good effects with less expensive materials such as cotton and latex. However, you can tell a major difference between the two. So you can see how actually spending the extra money for the more expensive pieces is actually worth it in the long run, and it actually will save you time, and you're paying for a bit of convenience and for a better outcome at the end of the day. So I'm actually going to take my finger here. It's another tool you can use. Use your finger instead of a sponge, as long as, of course, your hands are clean, which they should always be. You can lightly tap around. Because it's cream, you're able to use the warmth of your hand to help blend a bit. I'm going to take a little bit of a yellow as well. Just adding similar tones. Now that you know the fairly consistent tones that you see in the FX world, you'll be able to start planning your looks around there. Now, of course, we do want to match this to his skin tone. So after I wipe my hand off here and re-sanitize with a little bit of Purell, we're going to go into some more skin tone to match the latex better. Now you do want to note that it can be quite hard to blend latex to skin tone. Because latex does have a bright color to it, it does take a bit more work to blend latex to skin tone than any of the other materials that we use here. It is a very opaque product, so at the end of the day, it's very difficult to get it to match the skin tone. You just need to darken this a bit on him because he has a bit of a tan. So to match a little bit more, we're going to take a little bit of a deeper tone than what he is. That way the latex can darken as well. And just keep layering on until you get fairly close. Now again, because latex is so opaque, in this instance you can certainly use foundations. If you have regular skin tone foundations in your kit, those come in very well and very handy for coloring latex and anything else as well, but specifically latex because it does have that heavy cream base as a good cover here. But you start to see where the depth is coming from. Now this gunshot, we're going to make it seem like it's been sitting on him for a bit. It didn't just immediately happen, but he hasn't been to the hospital yet to clean up or anything like that, so there will be a fair amount of blood that we add in. Important to note with a gunshot also, there will be a slight char to the skin because it is burning the skin as well as shooting through the skin. So having a little bit of ash and char to the skin gives a bit more of a realistic effect as well. Now, to give the more realistic effect, what we're going to use to fill in is that scab blood. So the scab blood is already thick and a gel substance, which will fill in this little wound and give much more of a gross illusion than if it were to be by itself with regular blood. So taking our scab blood, you can just fill in. Now you don't want to go above this little ridge that we've created, but you do want to give height and dimension to what you're doing here. And you can see how always adding in this layer of moisture will make everything look more real. And again, it's not going to be a perfect circle. It's not going to tear the skin in a perfect circle when the gun goes through. And certain areas will be darker, like over here. This is where there's a little bit more depth. Maybe there's a little bit more over here, and you can really use this to build texture. Texture gives a lot to your look. Then you can fill in a bit. It would blow out slightly around the wound. And if you want to add a little bit more, you can take that dark blood, and this is where you can really have fun with letting it fall down. It's even good too to note, you don't always want to just add one dimension to the blood, because now you see we have the darker tone here and the lighter tone here. So depending on how it's meant to be filmed or shot through, you get more than just a flat blood going down. You have this jelly substance underneath, and then you can just let that one be as it is. Once it dries, you're able to re-moisten it with the KY to get the same shine as if it were more of a fresh wound. So one thing to pay attention to with gunshots, as well as you want to know what type of gun is used, what the bullet is, how it was shot, what angle it was shot at, all those things will pay importance as well. But the area of the body that the gun was shot at also matters. For example, if you think of the anatomy of the body, in the neck itself, there are a ton of main arteries and veins in there that if you hit those, the blood will spray. It will be crazy, so much blood, so adding that in there will make it more realistic. Now this one, we're imagining that the gun went straight through. So we have more depth here. If we're gonna be seen from another angle, there would be an entrance wound that we would have to add as well to make it more realistic too. For example, if we shot through straight here, you can imagine it went through and probably came out somewhere around his back like this. Granted, he might have a costume on where we don't see him without his shirt, but we would want to add blood to that area back there to give the illusion of the gun or the bullet going through the skin. Other cases, imagine that the bullet just clipped the top of the skin. You may just have a slice open there to make it look like something went through versus actually going in. So depending on where it is and how it was shot and how the gun was used will also pay importance to how you turn the makeup.